Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those guys were fast as lightning. They fought with expert timing. There was kung fu fighting. Hello everybody, and welcome back to Storyteller's Roll. I'm your host, David Lanier, and I'm an actor from Chicago, and I'm helping you all, hopefully, as storytellers and gamers and role players alike, understand how stories are structured for an adventure role-playing experience. Okay? Hopefully, during the series of these videos, we will understand what a lot of artists and actors understand because of their training and their experience. And I'm going to share some of that stuff with you so you can design adventures of your own and keep everybody at your tables engaged in the excitement. Isn't that going to be fun? Yeah. So last week on the video, we talked about the structure, a basic Aristotelian structure of a story in the Western tradition, right? And that is that we're going to have two lines. We're going to have comedy, right? Yay, everything's happy. Oh boy. I'm going to have drama, tragedy, and down there. And those are our two lines that we're going to sort of manipulate the audience's cycling through our story structure through, right? Of hope and fear, hope and fear, hope and fear, hope and fear, hope and fear. Also hope and fear cycles. But, and here's the trick. You can't have too much hope. People lose interest. Oh, look, he made it again. Oh, yay. You know, I really wish that kid would break his freaking... Oh, look at that. Isn't that great? Bless his heart. You know, I was just... you know, and then you lose your audience. If you have too much tragedy, your audience goes, oh, man. Oh. You know, this is too much. And they leave. So, unless you like jazz... A lot of people don't like jazz. I'm a big fan of blues music, which is the cornerstone of jazz, but that's another story. Or unless you're a Beatles fan, which... you know what? Paul McCartney and Ringo were probably the best elements. Well, Ringo, in my humble opinion, were probably the best elements. Well, okay, only Ringo. Look, this is just my opinion. Well, and George Harrison. George Harrison gets a, you know, yeah. I like George Harrison, and I like Ringo. They're both very, very good. But you know, John and Paul, they sort of ruin things for me, right? And the reason they ruin things for me is because all of their music, all of the Beatles' music, had to meet precise moments in musical precision. It had to be. Right? It had to be that way. Much like classical music. And I'm not trying to take away from the Beatles, but for me, I was more of a Rolling Stones fan, you know? See, the Beatles had perfect timing and precision, and everything was great, and you knew it was going to work. No questions asked. It was mathematically perfect. Rolling Stones, on the other hand, were more blues-based, right? And they let things sort of hang off the edge of the cliff, musically speaking, and then they were sort of like, just before it was about to fall off and like kill itself, Keith Richards would resurrect himself and pull it back from death. And it was awesome, right? And that's sort of the way I look at things, is things should be structured more like a Rolling Stones blues-esque emotional arc. There was a reason for my madness. Pay attention. So we have hope and fear cycles. And I know you don't think that the human emotion cycle or a range of human emotions can all be boiled down to just two, hope and fear. But trust me, they can. And they are. And that's really all Hollywood and blockbusters. Think about it. So, here you are. Hope and fear are the rails, the very rail structure we're going to use for our story. As I explained last week. See? Hope, fear. That's going to be our roller coaster. Question is, how, as storytellers, do we outline that? We want everybody to have the same experience. Pardon me, I'm going slightly blind here. Better? Good. Now, this is how we do it. This is the beginning of how we do it. We're going to build, sorry, I'm drawing this out for you. What we call an outline of our story and our story emotional arc, not the character's emotional arc, but our story emotional arc first. Because we need to know what kind of story we're telling, we need to know why we're telling it that way, and we need to kind of know what happens at the end. Otherwise, we really don't have much. And I personally like to start with the end. Where do I want my protagonists and my villains, my antagonists, to be at the end of the story structure? And last week I explained that you want your hero to be at the opposite end of where you want them to be at the end of the story, right? And almost always our villain at the end of at the beginning of the story is really, really scary. And really, oh, you can't beat him. And usually in a hero versus villain story, if you're going to end it with the villain sort of croaking, right? You want to build the hero up to be equal in stature to the villain, but you want to keep the villain at a certain state so that they're an equal match, right? By the end, the climatic end of the story, right? Otherwise, your audience. So here's our structures. We're going to have 7 points. 7. We call these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We call these the hook, plot turn 1, pinch 1, midpoint, pinch 2, and resolution. Huh? I hope you can read my writing. So we have the hook, plot turn 1, pinch 1, midpoint, pinch 2, resolution. And these are at the top because these are our emotional, or well, our story, right, points. These are the points our story is going to meet until it meets the resolution. It's called a 7-point plot structure, and it essentially comes out of the Star Trek guide to, or the narrator's, Star Trek narrator's guide to role-playing games or something. It's not really new, right, but it does meet our needs as an adventure. It's very, very useful as an adventure. We only have to keep track of 7 things as DMs, and that's awesome for our story creation purposes anyway, at the moment, and thus not hard, right? Okay. So some of the questions we might want to ask ourselves before we begin. I'm going to write down again, I apologize. Where are we going with our story? Where are we going to end up? Right? And that's kind of where I start. So if I was going to tell, like I promised, we're going to turn Star Wars into an adventure RPG, D&D adventure for all purposes, but it could be any RPG. I mean, there is a Star Wars RPG after all, but this is just for our story kind of thing. So let's look at where we want Luke to end up. We know that at the end of Star Wars, Episode 4, where we're first introduced to Luke Skywalker first introduces himself. He becomes a individual who is aware of his abilities with the magical power called the Force and his ability to manipulate it. Our arch villain has an equal ability to manipulate the Force, maybe even more potent than you could imagine, right? To our mentor for Luke, Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan and Darth Vader are pretty much equals when it comes to their ability to use the Force. And we know that in our heroic arc for Luke, at some point he has to embrace that he has this ability within himself, right? So we know emotionally we're going to start him at the beginning where he's just a pud in a swamp, or well, a desert planet. I think it's Tatooine, yeah, it's all desert and sand. And he's not really much. You know, he's got some potential, but he's still kind of green around the ears. And we're going to get him to a certain point where we introduce him as, at the end, or the climax, right, the guy who we can rely on to blow up that Death Star. So at the end of our story, which is where we're going to start with our climatic emotional roller coaster for the audience, is Death Star blows up, right? Headline, Death Star blows up, Luke saves the rebellion. Ba, 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 ba. But he's not there yet, and he needs somebody to guide him along. So we know our resolution, we know our climatic end. That's going to be our 7th sort of moment in this structure. So we have that. We know where we're going to end. If we create a graph, I'm going to draw a little graph for you just to get you started. Pardon me for a moment. If we draw a graph and we have our hero, we can say he starts down here as a dud, but our villain starts up here as superpowered awesome. So we know that's where we want to end up. So now in our little graph, we can keep, we'll say hero 1, because we're going to have more heroes in our story, obviously, but they're going to come into play differently in an RPG than they do in a cinematic film, but we can still structure it similarly. So our hero is going to be down here, and our villain will be up there. Huh? Hero, villain. And at some point, they're going to come closer in our plot line. And that's going to be a pinch, somewhere around here, pinch 2, just before the hero is ready to take on the bad guy, right? We might have a moment or a beat where we go, all hope is lost, just to get us involved emotionally into that hero. This happens for us at the moment where Luke Skywalker realizes he might not be able to blow up the Death Star with his computer navigation system. But we're not there yet. Anyway, I've talked on long enough and taken enough of your time. So I hope this helps, and we'll go over the rest of it next week. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch these videos, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that we can help others tell better stories at the gaming table. Thank you, and may the deity of your choice bless your dice. Bye.